Please put your hands together as we greet the Honourable President of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. May I call on Consulting Editor, India Today, Rajdeep Sardesai.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This year, the Indian Republic or independent India completes 70 years. So we are extremely privileged to have someone who has seen Indian independence through the triumphs and the turbulence of the last 70 years. He contested and won an election in the Rajya Sabha way back in 1969, has been External Affairs, Defense and Finance Minister of this country, Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission, and is now the President of India. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our great honor to have Shri Pranab Mukherjee at the India Today Conclave 2017. Before the President addresses us, it's also a great privilege to have the Indian Idol contestants, the finalists of 2009 with us. May I request all of you ladies and gentlemen to stand up for the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे.
As I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely privileged today to have with us Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, because no one possibly in contemporary Indian public life has seen the triumphs and the tribulations and the ebbs and the flows of Indian democracy quite the way he has. So we thought that in this 70th year of Indian independence, Dr. Mukherjee would give us a look back at a life in public life that has truly enriched many a ministry, many a government. Prime ministers have come and gone, but like the old brook, or should I say the Hooghly of Kolkata, Mr. Mukherjee has seen it all. So it is a great privilege to present Mr. Mukherjee and his speech to all of us on such a long innings in politics. The President of India.
Good evening. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to have this opportunity of speaking to this distinguished gathering on a subject which has been given to me: long innings, politics, power and office. Of course, long innings means a very long tenure. Perhaps I can justify to some extent that yes, I have a reasonable long innings. I entered into Parliament in July 1969 as member of Rajya Sabha, and my membership terminated again on July 2012, 43 years after my first entry, and that too because of the constitutional provisions Otherwise, I could have continued 2 more years in Parliament. But as the Indian Constitution says, President cannot hold any other office. And if he or she continues to be a member of the Parliament, immediately with the election to the office of the President, his membership will terminate automatically. So, my membership was terminated on 22nd July evening when I was declared elected as 13th President of the Republic. But for this subject I was little afraid, as my very good old friend Mr. Arun Puri, when he invited me, I do not know whether he took a little risk of asking me to speak on this subject, as I am known almost notoriously of exceeding time slotted to me, and particularly on a subject like this. Here I can tell you a very nice story of my personal life. I began my career as a teacher in a Calcutta University Constituent College, little away from the city of Calcutta. And to my utter surprise, I found, after a few months, that all my classes were scheduled at the end of the day. I asked the principal, what are the reasons? He said, I am sorry. All your colleagues complained against you that you exceed your time and spoil their classes. So they suggested that you should speak at the end and you can speak as much as you want. But I can assure you, I am not going to take much of the time this evening. I would like to make some few observations on the issues as I saw. Of course, a large part of my story has been already published in 2 volumes of my memoirs, and in the 3rd volume it will come, which will end for the period. I am covering only 43 years of my entry into Parliament and departure from Parliament. Presidential years, I am not bringing it. So it will be published shortly, maybe within 2-3 months. So some of these stories are already there. I entered into public life after 2 years of death of Jawaharlal Nehru. He died on 27th May 1964. My first appearance in a public platform of a political party was on 5th February 1966. Of course, it was a Congress group. Later on, it became an independent party, but initially, it was a Congress congregation under the presidency of the then PCC President, Mr. Honourable Mukherjee. But Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had a profound influence over the generations of mine, mainly because we began our tryst with the parliamentary democracy, of which he was one of the architects. His long innings as Prime Minister of India from 15th August 1947 to 27th May 1964, he has profoundly influenced the public life of India. It is not that he did not make mistakes, or the historians of now and of coming days will not have more critical view on it, but the fact remains. He took a tremendous risk of introducing parliamentary politics in a country which is so vast, so diversified, level of literacy was so low at that point of time, economic development was almost zero. But he took the risk. And it has been very aptly described in a newspaper published from London, Manchester Guardian, on 2nd February 1952, the year when India had first general elections, that India leaped into darkness of democracy without knowing what is waiting for it in future. One of the British statesmen, Sir Anthony Eden, who was Foreign Minister of Churchill during the Second World War, and later on he became the Prime Minister of England in the mid-50s. He was more candid in his observations by saying that it is Nehru's idealism and the ship will capsize, being stuck by the rock. A country having so much diversity, almost illiterate, level of political understanding so low, one of the most sophisticated political arrangements are being introduced, he will fail. But Nehru was undaunted. And perhaps, when we look back, the last general election, which was held in 2014, 66% of 800 million people voted to elect 543 members of Indian Parliament, lower house, Lok Sabha, from all parts of India. The boat did not capsize. Today everyone speaks of the marvel of Indian democracy. Nowhere in the world, they have no such population. China has a different system. 800 million people are exercising their rights and choosing a government, giving a decisive mandate. Therefore, if somebody says that yes, Nehru was the architect of the parliamentary system of government in India, it would not be wrong. He had strong faith. Of course, he had other colleagues who helped him immensely, like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, integrating India. India was not one piece of administration, one territory to be administered. On 15th August 1947, it was divided into India and Pakistan. There were 570 princely states. Nearly 43% of the Indian territory was administered by these 570 rulers. Each one of each had an agreement with the British government, accepting the British government as the paramount power. And they used to enjoy autonomy in their internal administrations of the territory. Thanks to Sardar Patel's sagacity, a large number of them, some of them as per the arrangements, which were contiguous to Pakistan, they went to Pakistan, but almost 520 princely states merged with India. That's why you will notice, if you go to the first copy of the Indian Constitution, there are classification of the Indian states. Part A states, Part B states, Part C states, Part D states. It was Nehru in 1956 which gave a new shape to the Indian territory by establishing, on the basis of the reports of Fajolali Commission, to have states based on languages. Today we are having 29 states. And the formation of the Indian states has not closed. As late as the creation of Telangana, dividing Andhra Pradesh, is there. So many states have been created. Therefore, the Indian democratic process is unfolding over the years, but process is democratic. Final decisions are taken by the people to choose their rulers, and administration is accountable to them through the elected bodies. Various policies have been adopted since the beginning of independence. Just I will give a few figures on the state of economy when the country became independent. For full 50 years, from 1900 to 1949, before India's independence, India's annual GDP growth was 0 to 1%. For 5 decades, hardly there is any growth. Yes, after 30 years of independence and introduction of the planning, one eminent economist jokingly pointed out, India's growth rate is Hindu growth rate because for 29 years it grew at the rate of 3.5%. But without rolling any head, without having any penal provisions to implement a particular policy, today Indian economy is the fastest growing among the large economy. And the size of the Indian economy today, it is expected to be $5 trillion in the next couple of years. A country which could not produce its food to feed itself. The situation was almost from ship to mouth. Various countries were known for providing food aids to India. PL 480, Food Aid Consortium. These were the familiar words when I first became a junior minister in the Council of Ministers of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. As junior minister, I used to see my senior minister is going with bunch of papers to attend the Aid Indian Consortium. But thanks to the efforts of the people of India, its policymakers, planners, when I became the full-fledged finance minister in the early 80s, I did not have to attend any Aid India Consortium meeting because before that India declared that it does not require any aid to sustain its development. By that time we have reached this stage. Yes, our economic development was not very big, it was not a big jump, but at the same time, whatever we could achieve, we achieved by our own efforts and contribution of the external help to our developmental process was less than 4 to 5%. Therefore, sustainably, because of our high savings rate, even in the first half of the from 2004 to 2009. If you look at our rate of investment, was around 38% to 40% of GDP, while our rate of savings was 36%, rate of domestic savings. As a result, in that 5-year slot, 4 years we had more than 8% GDP growth. And the base was made so strong that even the 2008 financial crisis, after that Eurozone crisis, India sustained. Yes, growth rate came down, but not drastically. 7.5% growth we maintained, except 1 year. Therefore, this speaks of the resilience of our economic strength. Today, India is one of the largest producers of food grains and net exporters, not importers. This year, our total grain production is expected to be 277 million tons. This has been possible because of the efforts of subsequent prime ministers. As I mentioned that I had little longer innings in public life and in politics. Of course, not in any state. I entered into parliament, and after a couple of months, when I am retiring from the presidency, I will retire from the central politics, not from any state government or any state politics. I did not even enter a municipality in my life. I came to parliament. I retired from parliament when I was elected president. And when I retired from president, I retired from public life totally. Therefore, nothing in between. The short point which I am trying to drive at, that during this period I came across many personalities. Of course, not Nehru, as I told you, but Mrs. Indira Gandhi had a strong influence over me. And I saw how she functions. Each and every one of us know that high point of her political career was her very effective and almost decisive role in the liberation of Bangladesh. But if somebody, some student of history meticulously follow, during the entire period from 25th March to the liberation of Bangladesh on 16th December 1971, Mrs. Gandhi did never speak of the liberation of Bangladesh. She only pleaded for India. Her whole argument was that there is an aggression on India. She made an observation in the United Nations. Because United Nations frequently were advising, have ceasefire. Do not interfere into the internal matters of another country. In response to that, Mrs. Gandhi said, and that observation was repeated almost word by word by the permanent representative of Soviet Russia, the then Soviet, while applying veto power to a resolution in the Security Council for immediate ceasefire on 6th of December 1971. What was the content? Content was that out of 184 countries who are member of the United Nations, there are more than 80 countries whose aggregate population would not be 10 million. More than 80 countries whose agrarian population, whose total aggregate population is not more than 100 million, 10 million, 1 crore. And the refugees which came as a consequence of the internal policies of another neighboring country, crossed 10 million. So the question she posed, if the population of 80 countries are thrust on one country, if this is not the definition of aggression, I would like to know what is the definition of the aggression. And on this issue, Soviet Russia voted on 6th of December against the demand of immediate ceasefire by both India and Pakistan on issues of Bangladesh. This is the high point of diplomacy. From her speech, from her observations, nobody can find out that she is interfering in the internal politics of another country. She is expressing concern of her own country, which she represents, of which she is Prime Minister. Apart from that, perhaps she is one of the most effective Prime Minister who could utilize power to further the principles which he believed. Subject is long innings, power, politics, office. Politics is associated with power. Power is associated with office. And so far Indian Constitution is concerned, unlike France or USA, power is concentrated in Prime Minister. Because he is not only first among the equals, perhaps he is little more than that. Because from the days of Jawaharlal Nehru to the days of current Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, we find Prime Minister as the face of the ruling party to catch the support of the people. Therefore, he derives authority from the people. And that authority gives him the power. Question is how he or she will exercise that power. Mrs. Gandhi exercised that power to implement the authority of the people as represented in Parliament. Please remember the time, particularly the eminent journalists, I will request them to go back to their memories, the situation in which she brought 24th Amendment of the Constitution after winning the 1971 election. What were the reasons and background of it? For the first time in the Indian constitutional history, some sort of confrontation, or at least apparent confrontation, started in 1967. Supreme Court gave its verdict on the Goloknath case, which was very important, that Parliament has no right to amend the fundamental rights. 1967, 17 years after adoption of the Constitution. Till then, the general belief, the scholars, the lawyers, they explained Indian Constitution, Indian Parliament is omnipotent. They have all power. They can amend any part of the Constitution. Goloknath case, Supreme Court, by a majority of one vote, full bench, gave verdict no. And as a result, many of the social legislations were declared ultra vires. Bank nationalization, MRTP Act, abolition of the privileges, of princes. All these were struck down by the Supreme Court. In 1971, Mrs. Gandhi made it an electoral point while seeking the verdict from the people. I don't want only majority from you. I want special majority. I want more than two-thirds majority in Parliament so that I can bring the amendment of the Constitution which requires special majority. Give me. I will amend and nullify the judgment of the Supreme Court which is standing in the social legislation. I am not going into the merit and demerits of it. I am not going to sit on the value judgment, whether it is right or not, but the fact is that she got two-thirds majority. She brought 24th Amendment of the Constitution. 24th Amendment of the Constitution, if you go through, you will find what enormous changes were brought in Article 368 of the Constitution, which deal with the amending provisions of the Constitution. She exercised her power. Power which she derived from the people through electoral mandate. And finally, in the case of Keshavananda Bharati, Supreme Court agreed. Contention was that whether the Parliament has the constituent power or constituent power of the Parliament has ceased with the cessation of the Constitution, when the Constituent Assembly was over and Provisional Parliament was created on 26 January 1950. 67 judgment, Justice Subbarao's judgment, said that no, Parliament has no power. In Keshavananda Bharati case, Supreme Court reiterated that yes, we agree that Parliament has constituent power, but at the same time, Parliament cannot alter the Constitution of the basic feature of Constitution. And what are the basic features? They said that we are not explaining in details. We are giving you some illustrative instances, but not exhaustive. As and when situation will demand, Supreme Court will announce it. So politicians use their power in office. There is a beautiful book, How American Presidency Has Used the Power. It is a very recent publication, and he has not dealt with all the major presidencies before the contemporary period. He has dealt with FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, up to Clinton. That's how American presidents have exercised their power. Therefore, politics is associated with power, and power is associated with office. And in Indian context, office of the Prime Minister has tremendous power. And all Prime Ministers have effectively used this power to achieve the objective for which they sought the mandate of the people. Two other Prime Ministers I would like to mention, with whom I did not work directly under them, because I served 4 Prime Ministers, all of them were Congress Prime Ministers. And of these 4 Prime Ministers, of course I had largest tenure during the Indira Gandhi's time, almost 10 years, with Rajiv minimum, only 2 months, and with P.V. Narasimha Rao 5 years, and Dr. Manmohan Singh 8 years. From each of them I have learned something. I have been highly impressed by the profound knowledge, sober approach, and complete autonomy which Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh case to his ministers. And the novel way he found out, as he ran the coalition government, and coalition government has many problems, but to find out the problems, he evolved an instrumentality through group of ministers, GOM, and empowered group of ministers, EGOM, where the contentious issues were referred to this group and the recommendations of the group were approved by the cabinet without much debate. Present Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, he has his own way of dealing with the things. And I must give him credit. How quickly he picked up every other Prime Minister of India, from Charan Singh to Chandrasekhar, who had very short innings. All of them had profound experience in Parliament. But a man straight coming from a state administration of a provincial government, being the head of the government at the federal stage, and acquiring mastery over foreign relations, external relations, complicated external economy, and particularly after the crisis of 2008, a very powerful organization, though informal but very powerful, has emerged. It is G20. Almost every year, sometimes twice in a year, G20 deals with the major issues of international money, finance, trade, sanctions. A Prime Minister to acquire in-depth knowledge speaks a volume of him. But apart from that, his observation, I appreciate much when he said, one can win election by majority. बहुमत से चुनाव जीत सकता, लेकिन राज करने के लिए बहुमत नहीं, सर्वमत चाहिए. This is truly the spirit of democracy. You can win election by getting 49 votes out of 100. But if you ignore 49, getting 51, you will not do justice to the people and to the country. There you require broad consensus, if not unanimity. These theses should be propounded and implemented in letter and spirit so that our system can be strengthened. Another was very effective Prime Minister, but with a complete different style, a different approach. He was Atal Bihari Vajpayee. I will give you just one instance how much he could disarm his critics. One day, I was then member of Rajya Sabha. Suddenly I found that Prime Minister is coming to my seat before the session began. I felt quite embarrassed, got up and said, Atalji, why you are coming to me? You should have sent for me. He said, no matter, we are friends. Then he requested me something which struck me more. He said, nobody knows, but I know. George Fernandez, a very hard-working, competent minister, he was then defense minister. Don't be too harsh on George. He is not well. I told him that I appreciate. Personally, we are good friends. But Prime Minister, I feel, I appreciate, I salute your concern for your colleagues. This is just one instance, but the way he handled. Until today, many people, I have nothing to do in day-to-day administration. Indian President is figurehead. But people come and make representations. I was having some representations just a few days back. And they told me that we have to resolve the Kashmir issues. And I told them, why don't you? I am not the authority. When you meet the authority, tell them, just take the few lessons from the leaf, from the pages of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, how he dealt with. Therefore, each and every Prime Minister, in and in his own way, have dealt with the issues, have exercised their power. Office, of course, has its own burden. I have no doubt I have enjoyed office for quite some time. More than 37 years in Parliament, 22.5 years in the ministry. But I must say, I did never consider that because of holding the office, either my wisdom has increased or my importance has increased. Always I kept in mind, and which I think it is very relevant, that office is nothing but a service. And a service to the people. Umpteen number of times I have spoken, whatever I have felt. Politicians always speak. That's why I was a little worried that whether my good friend Arun is taking a risk of asking me to speak on this subject. I do not know how he will stop me. But as I told you, that I will not take much time. But one more point. I have told it in number of forums. But still I feel this is to agitate our mind. And we should build up a very strong public opinion to prevent the disruption of the proceedings of Parliament or legislators. Because we have the most effective, credible, with which we common people are directly involved, is elected assemblies of the provincial government and elected Lok Sabha of the federal government. Enormous power is vested in them. Primary job of them is to make law. When Anna Hazare has his agitation for Lokpal Bill, John Lokpal Bill, I am not talking into the merit, demerit of it. But it shows the weakness of the system. The job is to be done by Parliament. Perhaps somebody feels Parliament is not doing its job. That's why he comes and says, makes an agitation. Look, you have failed. I have provided. I want to provide an instrument to deal with corruption, Lokpal Bill. You do it. As I was heading the cabinet committee to negotiate with him, along with some of my senior cabinet colleagues, number of meetings I had. I did not agree with all his points, but the basic fact remains. I could not forget that from 1970 till the other day, we could not legislate on Lokpal issues. A recommendation was made by Shantanam Committee, endorsed by Morarji Desai's Reforms Committee in the mid-60s. And still then it is hanging. Not only that, I am disturbed that days of sittings of the Parliament and assemblies are getting reduced. When I came as Member of Parliament, 26 weeks in a year Parliament used to meet. 26 to 27 weeks in a year. That means half of the year. Nowadays it is not so. I have some figure and I think I would like to quote it, that in 1952, the first Parliament, 52 to 57, there were 677 sittings and they passed 319 bills. And the 15th Parliament, they had only 357 sittings and passed 181 bills. Because the disease of disruption has crept in. Disruption in Parliament and legislation is totally unacceptable to me. It can never be accepted as an effective parliamentary intervention. And particularly if you find that in 15th Lok Sabha, as much as 41.6% of the allotted time were wasted for disruptions. Session after session, passed without transacting any business. Who will make law? Who will scrutinize? Constitution has provided. We have established the institutions of CAG. CAG gives a report to Parliament, Lok Sabha. Money and finance is to be discussed. Parliament provides the authority to only Lok Sabha, only elected assembly in respect of state, to impose tax, to sanction, approve expenditure, and to approve appropriation. No tax can be levied. No expenditure can be incurred. No money can be withdrawn except the authority of Parliament. The Finance Minister, last budget he presented, which is still going on, are more than 17 lakh crores of rupees. 17 lakh crores of rupees. When our expenditure was paltry to compare to today's. First revenue budget of independent India was 397 crores only. And today it is 17 lakh crores. But the time which we spent to discuss the budget of 397 crores and the time we are spending to discuss the expenditure of 17 lakh crores, make a comparison. This is the basic deficiency which is crept in. And we shall have to be alert. Lawyers must make law. Expenditures must be scrutinized. Rationality of expenditure must be examined. It is taxpayers' money. A poor man who lives on his daily wages also pay tax to buy a matchbox. Nobody has any moral authority to squander money collected from the people. And only people's representative. Why Constitution has given this power? For not fun, but so that effective exercise and control are made by Parliament, who consists of the directly elected representative of the people from Himalaya to Cape Comorin, from Mizoram to Dwarka. You won't find a single place in India where there is not a representation to Lok Sabha or to a legislative assembly. But these institutions, we must effectively use it. And if we fail to do so, I am afraid it is going to pose problems to our system. And the credibility which we have achieved as managing the largest functional democracy in the world, with 800 million voters on its list. And truly, it is amazing how we manage. When I shut my eyes and think that today we are 1.3 billion people plus. In our daily life, in some parts of India, if we add together, more than 200 languages are being used every day, 1600 dialects, 7 religions, all three major ethnic groups, Mongolites, Caucasians, Dravidians, but all living under one system, one flag, one law, one constitution. It is amazing. Amazing power of people of India to manage this huge diversity. But over 70 years, there have been fault lines are found. There have been deficiencies. Shortcomings are noticed, some of which I have pointed out. And I do hope an enlightened gathering like this will surely ponder over. And as I promise that I will not take you out more time, I have taken enough, but not more. I would like to conclude with an observation of Rabindranath Tagore. He said, and I quote, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw the life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukherjee. I want to say thank you from the bottom of our heart for our long speech. I'm just going to play some pictures behind you, which I want you to see, because you've spent 70 years. So just if you could turn, if you could look back at these lovely pictures that we're... If I'll just this way slightly, sir. So you can see this picture. This is of you with Mrs. Gandhi. This is you with Indira Gandhi and Narasimha Rao. There is a picture with Rajiv Gandhi. There is a picture with Sonia Gandhi. There's a picture that we have with Dr. Manmohan Singh. You look very, very worried in that picture. I'm trying to catch the audience to catch your responses to them. And I have this final picture of you with the pipe. And I know you don't want to answer any questions, but I just want to ask you about the pipe. When did you stop the pipes?
Just after 20 years, I started.
I started in 73, I stopped in 93.
I see. So for 20 years you were a pipe smoking professor in a sense. But when you see all these pictures, sir, and you said much of it in your speech today, do you get nostalgic? Because today you asked us that you finished your long career and you're going to retire. That this is it. You've even given us a speech. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is an impromptu speech that he gave, because there is an actual speech that he has given here. And there is an important line, sir, that I'm going to quote to the audience. You have said, and you've quoted from Jawaharlal Nehru, I do not want India to be a country in which millions of people say yes to one man. I want a strong opposition. I don't know how that is going to be interpreted today, but you've given a big headline, I can tell you, to most newspapers. And you have also quoted Nehru to say, we do not want Caesars. So we will wait and see how that is interpreted by the media. But if I may ask you, sir, in conclusion, 20 years, 73 to 93, smoking the pipe. Now that you say you will not be in public life anymore once you retire in few months, what does Pranab Mukherjee intend to do once you've retired, sir?
I do not know. You have to wait and see.
Are you worried that you will be finally missing all a lifetime from 69 to today, spending in public life? Will you write more? Will we see more books from you? A book on the Constitution?
No, I do not know, but I have to complete my memoirs, which will come, third volume. But perhaps, I do not know, whether somebody else will write or myself will pen down my days in presidency. I have not touched yet.
And I will ask you in conclusion, sir, as we end, 50 years is a very long time in public life, and people always ask this, how would you like people to remember you, your legacy? People will ask you this question, and this may be, your last appearance before you finally retire. So I'm going to ask you, what would you like to be remembered as in this life?
I would like to answer this question, that I don't leave any legacy, because this is a democracy. Democracy is a mass. I am a part of the mass, and I will melt into the mass. As in the Tempest, Prospero told, these are our actors, but melted into air, into thin air, leaving no rack behind. I would like to be in the middle of the people, midst of people, no legacy, no rack behind. Thank you.
That's a wonderful way, sir. I think that deserves a standing ovation. For a politician to come here and say he doesn't want to leave a legacy is a huge thing. And I'm going to ask you one final thing that you will do, I know. You will go back to your village, and I presume, like every year, you will lead the Durga Puja celebrations in your village, right?
As long as I can do it.
Wonderful. As long as he can do it, you will lead the Durga Puja celebrations, and you will melt, as you said, into the masses. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of India, Pranab Mukherjee.
And may I please also request the Chairman and Editor-in-Chief, India Today Group, Mr. Arun Puri, to kindly come on stage and give a very small token of our appreciation, of our love to the President of India. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was such an honor to have you. The 16th edition of the India Today Conclave. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll request each one of you to kindly rise for the national anthem once again. And we also have, once again, the very gifted and talented, the singing sensation, the 5 finalists of the Indian Idol show.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाए तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे